Yeah, I'd just like to speak in support of these amendments. I don't see how it's at all credible that the Secretary-General of the Department of Defence can sit on a body that's supposed to be an independent external oversight body over the Defence Forces. And as Deputy Berry has just pointed out, if there is a glaring contradiction when you talk about having the right to remove people where there are conflicts of interests, and then you ensure that there's a conflict of interest by putting the Secretary-General of the Department of Defence on a body which might well be asking serious questions about the Department of Defence. It makes no sense whatsoever, and it indeed has the potential to completely undermine the independence and objective of an independent oversight body. And I haven't been following this bill terribly closely, but my interest in it was perked by a case that was brought to me recently, which I have sought to give an airing in this House over the last few weeks, but it seems to me an instance of precisely the problem here, which is the case of a sergeant who had been 35 years in the Army, done multiple tours, foreign tours, peacekeeping missions, but who had made, as he informed me, a protected disclosure about problems in the Defence Forces, specifically in his case about the use of chemicals that were dangerous for the members of the Defence Forces who were working with them, the lack of health and safety, lack of protective equipment, the impact on the health of himself and his colleagues, and so on and so forth. And he came to me because he was denied, or says he was denied, and I believe him, what's called a presentation, something I'd never heard, at the end of his career. And he was absolutely certain that it was because he had made a protected disclosure. And he said other of his colleagues were also denied this presentation, which, as I understand it, Deputy Berry, you probably know these things better than I do, is a sort of ceremony when you're finished your career, you bring your family in and so on, and there's a sort of ceremony or presentation for those who are finishing in the Defence Forces. And when I put in a question to the Department of Defence about this, what I get back is the following from, presumably, this is the department over which the Secretary-General presides. And it says, I would like to thank the Deputy for this question. I'm not at liberty to discuss or comment on any protected disclosure, fair enough. However, I'm assured by military management that no member of the Defence Forces is denied anything on foot of having made a protected disclosure, blah, blah, blah. So, here's a complaint, and let's remember, this external oversight body is supposed to deal with grievances. Here's, what? It says in the bill it does. Okay, well, I'll read it out now, seeing as you've decided to interrupt me. I'll just read it out for you, will I? Or maybe you don't know what's in your own bill. Okay, right. So what does it deal with? What does it deal with in its functions? The grievance process. Yes, the grievance process. And it's oversight over human resources. Human resources. Okay. But this same person, by the way, just to be clear, attempted to go to the WRC and discovered he can't go to the WRC. Because you can't, apparently. You're deemed a worker, not an employee, when you're a member of the Defence Forces, which seems ridiculous to me, by the way, but that apparently you can't go to the WRC with a case of penalisation. Yeah, your officials are confirming that, it looks like. So where does this person go? Well, he comes to me, I put in a question to the department, and the Secretary-General, who oversees all this, goes to military management and says, is this happening? And they say, no. And then that's the answer we get back. Right? So I wouldn't have a great deal of faith if this is a body that is supposed to be an external oversight body, if that's the attitude that is taken by the department to grievances raised by members of the Defence Forces. I don't know why you're shaking your head. If you want to explain to me now, you can explain. But to me, that's just an instance of how there's a problem. Because surely an external oversight body should precisely be something that doesn't have that sort of cosy relationship or potential conflict of interest, where it might really be in their interest to admit there's a problem or something being done wrong, and therefore just takes the word of military management on an issue that has been raised, a grievance that has been raised by a member of the Defence Forces.
Yeah, could I just say that? And I apologise for nodding my head all the time, but you did say you didn't. In fairness to you, and I don't mean this in any. You said you had come to the bill. You had, been following it to extensive degree. Yeah. So the point I would make generally to all the deputies: what's the genesis of this? Why are we bringing in legislation, part of which is establishing an external oversight body? Because the independent review group recommended it. And why did the independent review group recommend it? What was the independent review group doing? It was investigating shocking behaviour, misogyny, sexual assault, sexual abuse of members, female and male. And I can recall Deputy Reader Cronin saying to me in advance of the publication of the independent review group, will you commit now, Minister? During question, will you commit now, Minister, to implement all of the recommendations of the independent review group? Not one deputy here today mentioned a victim. Not one member here mentioned the origins of this. Why the independent review group felt it necessary to make a recommendation to create an independent oversight body with the Secretary General on it, by the way. And the reason it's called independent oversight, the independent review body recommended that it be independent of the Defence Forces. Of the Defence Forces. Whether you like it or not. That was the recommendation. And every one of you were really, when it came out, when it was published, you were full of eye dudgeon. Never again should this happen. Never again should we allow something like this to happen. And because I'm implementing a recommendation of that same group that went into great detail on all of this issue, and which, by the way, some members of the Defence Forces don't agree with, don't accept it. I would refer people to the contributions in the other House by some members who raised serious credibility issues around the independent review group report, as if it went over the top. This was said, and has been said also by people within the defence community. Let's call it spade a spade. And that's why. And also there was a view that previous iterations of monitoring groups simply did not work because they were of a representative nature. Now, RACO doesn't like me saying that, and others don't like me saying that, but I'm going to say it because that's the truth of how things have unfolded. And to give confidence that a grievance process, and the job of the oversight body is to review the grievance process, Deputy Boyd Barrett, so that we create a new grievance process that will be truly independent and give members of the Defence Forces confidence that when they bring a complaint, they won't be penalised. I mean, a lot of members, if you meet them, would say to you, rank and file members, if we bring a complaint, it's more or less the end of my career. If I do a protected disclosure, they'll say it's more or less the end of my career. So we're trying to change that. That's why we're having an independent oversight body. That's what the whole thing's about. And I'm not so sure you are. You say you are. But when we try and do something practical about it, you find other reasons to oppose it. And you start getting Jesuitical about the public service management and the separation between Chief of Staff and the Secretary General. Like, there's another agenda here. There's an anti-SecGen agenda. There's an anti-department agenda. I'm not saying you have it, but it's in the ether. Well, Deputy, you're around a long time too. And I've noticed the train of thought in this debate has been the department on one hand and military on the other. Sorry, it's there. And it's there. It is there in all of this debate. And that is why I believe, and I agree with you, in terms of the need for a more comprehensive piece of legislation to demarcate properly the roles of a CHA, the Chief of the Defence Forces, in its entirety, and, as Deputy Berry said, equality of status among the heads of services. I agree with all that, and that has to be done. But there is a dangerous trend emerging, even from some of the representative bodies when it's made to me. It's almost as if the civilian, if you like, wing cannot have one up on the... There's a bit of that going on in the representations that have been made. That is a takeaway I take from it. Whereas what I'm trying to... I was presented with recommendations, and I'm faithfully implementing those recommendations, because I do believe that the review body and the judge understood the relationship between the department and the Defence Forces. And we have to give confidence back to the members. And I think a lot of reform has happened as a result of the independent review group. And I think the Chief of Staff is leading that reform. And we need to do more, and we need to do it faster. And all of this is related to recruitment, retention, induction, and so on. And we've taken a number of measures. We have an overarching strategic framework now to try and drive on the reforms. And part of it was the establishment of an external oversight body. And the IRG recommended that the Secretary-General be on it. As a person with experience of how government works, I actually see the logic of it. Not in terms of trying to get one over anybody, but in terms of trying to implement change and make sure change happens. No, that is out there, Deputy. You might say it's not, but it is out there. I'm sorry not to say it, but... Sorry? I'm not saying it's your intention at all. I said it's out there in terms of representations that have been made on this issue. Otherwise, like the whole train of thought has been around, well, if the Sec-Gen is on it, the Chief of Staff should be on it. Like, that's not the way I look at it. I mean, or that the representatives body should be on it. Or it's as if the department is at loggerheads with the Defence Forces. It shouldn't be. And that shouldn't be the frame around which the debate happens. And there's an element of that happening in this context. Because this has been a relentless campaign about undermining the Secretary-General's role on the oversight body. And I regret that it's come to this. And particularly because we have to go back to the origins of this. I didn't invent this. Like, I didn't come up with this idea. The independent review body did. All of you asked me to accept the recommendations of the independent review body. All of you went along with the resolution before the House because we were all shocked with what the independent review group said. And I was determined then. Like, I don't just take things and say things, oh, I agree it's terrible, and do nothing. And some of this isn't popular. I could easily do and say, oh, whatever, you're having yourself. Sure, who else wants to go on it? We'll all go on it. Be a nice, happy committee. Everybody's represented on it. But would change happen? Would we really get impact? I don't think we would. And I'm not going to compromise on what the independent review group put forward. Set up before I became minister. I agreed with it as Taoiseach that we should set up an independent review body for 12 months in advance of a potentially tribunal of inquiry, which it did recommend that we establish, and that has been established. And I accept the bona fides what the deputies are saying, but I think we need to go back to the origins of this, which was the independent review group's report. Who are we trying to help here? We're trying to help the members of the Defence Forces. We're trying to change the culture within the Defence Forces. And we're trying to make sure that some of the practices that were covered by the independent review group do not happen again. And I think a lot of work is underway within the Defence Forces to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and they're taking measures, to be fair. The Chief of Staff is doing that. But equally, I uphold the right of the government of the day to implement recommendations from the independent review body, and it's not in any way sort of an attempt to undermine anybody or the Defence Forces themselves.
Yeah, Taoiseach. Yeah, I said I haven't been following it closely. I'm not on the Defence Committee. All right? Yeah. But I did speak at second stage, and I raised some of these concerns. And just for the record, and I'm sure others did as well, I think we all spoke at length about some of the horrible stuff that went on and the impacts on the victims and the abuses, the sexual, physical and other abuse. So I think it's not fair really to suggest that that's not as big of a concern. I don't know why this is a source of amusement. I honestly don't. It's incredible. I don't know why the smiles are. But anyway, because I think we've all heard the testimonies and we're all as keen to do something to make sure that sort of stuff doesn't happen again. Now, I mean, I don't even know who the Secretary-General of Defence is, so I'm not casting any personal aspersions at them as an individual. But what I do know is institutions and organisations of state and all other kinds have a tendency sometimes to sort of defend their own territory. and not to be that, so to be resistant at times to people who want to question what they've done or how they do things. That's why you have independent external oversight. I mean, you think about the church and state scandals in this country in terms of industrial schools and mother and baby homes. Let's be honest. State departments didn't exactly cover themselves in glory, right? They didn't. That doesn't mean everybody in them is a horrible person or individuals they were naming, but it does mean external independent oversight should mean external independent oversight so you don't have conflicts of interest. And I cited the example I gave because I just found it a bit, I don't know, just lacking of sort of, we'll go and ask the management, is there anything behind this? And the management in the Defence Forces say nothing behind it, and that's the end of it. Like, to me, that doesn't indicate a great willingness to get to the bottom of certain things. Yeah, so let's keep it independent. Not potentially, let's put it that way, potentially compromised.
People can see there's an element of frustration there, the bottom line is victims weren't mentioned in this debate. They weren't mentioned at the committee either, to any great extent. It's all about equivalence between the military and the defence and the Department of Defence. But the origins of this is the Independent Review Group. It called it. It produced its report. It was terrible reading for all of us. It made recommendations of the most fundamental kind. And above all, that the external oversight body would be independent of the Defence Forces for the very reasons, Deputy Boyd Barrett, that you have outlined. Whether that be fair or not, that's what the Independent Review Body, and I met them. I met the Independent Review Body. I met the chair. They were very clear to me that they didn't want a repeat of previous iterations of groups that would monitor this and monitor change. They said that won't cut it, Deputy. And they were saying, basically, if you want to effect radical change and transformation of culture within our defence forces, we need an external oversight body that's independent of our defence forces, because the department officials were not under scrutiny by the IDG at all. Now that has to be said, and so that's the context for all of this. And what basically there is, in my view, an agenda now to try and bring about reform, change for the better. And we don't want situations where people feel that they cannot bring a complaint, or that we want to create a grievance process, that gives confidence to members and by the way, that is beginning to work. We are here getting more complaints in some respects, so the system is, which actually is a sign that people are feeling more confident to bring forward complaints. We've made changes where any violation or any sexual assault is now immediately referred to the Gardaí. So a lot of changes occurring, and I pay tribute to the Chief of Staff and the team in terms of reforms that are happening already. But when I mentioned the other House to Deputy Leader, when I was talking about the debate on the Independent Review Group in the other House, nothing to do with the external oversight body, but the debate. No, this is what I sorry, you missed my point. I was referring to a debate in the other House where some people question whether the Independent Review Group was correct in its conclusions or went over the top in its conclusions. And they were coming from a certain perspective, shall I say. And it's one I've heard. There was attempts after the Independent Review Group was published to question whether it went over the top and all of that. That happened too. And so I said to everybody, where there has been resistance, there's been resistance to some of what the IDG said. There's been resistance to the idea of cultural change. It's there. And part of the resistance to the oversight body is part of that. And people might like me saying that. Not in this House. I take them bona fides as the deputy, sir.
Deputy Cronin, you would right to reply.